are bright and shiny in my mind. You got me loving, hating, crazy indecision in my mind.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Aaron Blasey.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blasey, and this is episode number 64. Happy Monday to everybody out there. It's another great Monday. We are in June finally, and I feel like the year is flying by. I feel like it's going to be deer season before we know it. But I can't wait for that either. But I really don't want my summer to be gone, I'll tell you that. So this week's podcast is going to be a little different. I was actually asked to come on the Habitat podcast and with Jared and Brian, the guys that run the Habitat podcast. And what they do is they do a lot of stuff on habitat for whitetails and everything. And they've been listening to my podcast and wanted to know more about the 1 acre and how it all came to be, and you know what I've done with it in the past 3 years, and kind of where it started and where it's at now. And just kind of wanted to, talk about habitat, but also talk about hunting. And we also get into things like scent control. They wanted to know what my scent control regimen was, so we dive into that a little bit. And we get into some things about, thinking outside the box and just kind of taking a step back and, thinking differently how to use trail cameras and, scouting. So this one, they are kind of doing the interviewing and I'm answering the questions, so it's a little different, but I hope you guys enjoy it. There's a lot of good content in this one. So with that being said, I'm going to kick it over to that interview that I did with Jared and Brian, and hope you guys enjoy it.
I am natural.
All right, everybody, we're back with another episode of the Habitat Podcast. We have Brian, my co-host, on the line, and Aaron Blasey from the Fall Podcast on with us. How you doing, Aaron?
Good. How are you guys?
I'm doing well, sir.
Doing great,
well.
Thanks.
Good deal. How's your guys' weather?
We're getting those storms, I think, that you had yesterday or the day before, Jared. They're hitting us pretty hard. I know Ohio got tore up. I'm hoping my cabin and my barn are okay when I get up there this weekend.
Oh, yeah. I know there's some wind that moved through western Ohio, maybe even a tornado, I think. We were just getting more of some on and off storms up here. A lot of rain, like usual.
Yeah.
Today was fairly nice. How about you, Aaron?
It's so wet up here. I mean, I'm in the central part of Michigan, the lower peninsula, and I think my rain gauge, for over the last, since last Wednesday or Thursday, I think I had just over 2 inches of rain. So it's like, it's so wet. Farmers can't get in the fields right now. The wheat is starting to come on pretty good, but nobody can get in to even just plant corn or beans. So I feel bad for the farmers, and it's good for food plots, spring plots if you got them already in, so but yeah, it's pretty wet up here.
Yeah, I am one of those guys who doesn't have any in yet, just a lot of trees and grasses and things like that. Brian, yours should be getting a good soak right off the bat here, the ones that you have in so far.
Yeah, the Chicory and the Border Patrol are loving it.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, Aaron, I wanted to get you on here. I've been listening to your podcast for a while. You got to support us Michigan folks, got to support each other. So, and I've been hearing you mention, how you getting into this habitat management stuff. You work on a 1 acre property, which caught my attention right away. And you're just a, regular old deer hunting fool like the rest of us. So I figured it'd be great to get you on here and do a little BS session. Let's start it out, man. Tell us about you, where you're from, your occupation, what part of the state you're in, etc., if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure, man. My name's Aaron Blasey. I've ran the Fall Podcast. I started it just right now. It's been a year. So a year ago, I've been doing that. And my daily duties, I work at a company called Rusted Rooster Media, and I've been doing that for the last 7 years. And basically my day-to-day is, right now in this time in the summer, spring, summer, and leading into the fall, I edit and produce outdoor television shows that are on Sportsman and Outdoor Channel. And, in the fall, I'm out filming and hunting, from basically basically September till January 1st, and sprinkled in January a couple hunts here and there, and then once we get back in the the winter months, it's back to the grind behind a computer and producing and editing and stuff like that. So that's kind of my daily deal. And last couple of years I've taken on a new role with Chris and Casey Kiefer. They're my bosses. I work with them every day, and they wanted me to do some of their farm management on their properties. We got a big lease in Kansas, and we got a couple in Ohio, and so I've been kind of taking over that role as well, and just trying to maintain the properties I have here in Michigan to hunt myself too. So it's every day, 365 days a year, I think about deer and what I need to be doing, whether it's on their leases or mine, or what deer's making it through, or what I'm going to do. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of me in a nutshell, and I basically live and breathe deer when I'm not, obviously doing family things and hanging out with them. So yeah, that's basically me.
Oh, that's awesome, man. And so, I mean, we'll get along just fine then, us three. There's no problem there.
Yeah.
Brian and I have that same passion, addiction, what my wife might call a problem. But yeah, that's awesome, man. How did you get into that role with the Kiefer boys? I met them a few years back at ATA. Seemed like great guys. I know they're Michigan guys as well. How did you start working for them, or did you study that stuff in college, or how did it all come together?
Yeah, so first of all, Chris and Casey are, top-notch guys. They literally, I can't say enough good things about them and what they've done for me over the last 7 years. They're not only bosses, but they're really good friends of mine. So I get the privilege to be able to work beside them every day, and not only be on a kind of like a employee side of things, but a good friend. So that's pretty cool as well. But back when I was in high school, I took a liking to video and editing, and I really like that. And we had my football coach was our video productions teacher, and I started taking on that and doing some projects there, and I just loved hunting, so that's kind of where it started in a way. I went to college and went to Ferris State University. They have a really good program for television and digital media productions, and spent my time there, got my degree, and in my senior year, I was going to take an internship, and I was going to either do it with Chris and Casey. They were on my radar, or Bone Collector, and then Buck Commander. So I wanted to do one of the three, and it just so happened Chris and Casey were in my backyard, literally. Right here in Midland. So they were within a half hour, and sent all my work to them and my demo reel and everything. And they said, "You want to come in for an internship?" And I said, "Heck yeah." So I started, and I was supposed to be there for 6 months, and they hired me after 2 months, and I've been there ever since. So that's kind of how I got started. And, 7 years later, here I am, doing things, producing their shows, and just having a lot of fun doing it.
Oh, that's awesome, man. What a cool story. That's how it's supposed to work, I think.
Yeah.
You go study what you want to do. You aim high for the big three, or whatever you want to call it, and you get a job with one of them. I think that's exactly how it's supposed to go.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I get shit from my friends all the time saying, you've got the best job in the world and everything. And it did kind of fall in my lap. I won't lie to you, but I do have an unbelievable job. I said there's a couple jobs that would probably be a lot cooler than mine, and one would be, obviously playing Major League Baseball, because I'm a huge baseball fan. So I think that would be kind of key. But it's like 1% of people get to do that. So I think I'm gonna take this route and save my body too.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I have a buddy who plays Major League Baseball, and he, like you, I know, it seems all great, but you guys work your butts off, man. You're on the road. Both you and him are on the road a ton. So that
Yeah.
It may seem all great, but that wears on you, I'm sure, away from the family and home and everything like that. So I know there's a sacrifice for those things there. So.
For sure, man. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, so getting into hunting and habitat management, you're taking on some new roles with these guys, managing some of their farms and leases with them, for them. How did you get into hunting and start managing for for better deer habitat or wildlife habitat? Like, where did it all start?
So, I mean, ever since I was little, 4 and 5 years old, I remember my dad, he's just been my mentor, and he got me into all this, and I'm glad he did, and because it is my favorite thing to do, in life. If there was no such thing as hunting, I really don't know what I would be doing, honestly. But
Playing baseball.
Well, I would hope so, yeah. And I'd be at the latter part of my career now. I'm 32, so I'd be probably getting pushed out of the majors. But anyway, yeah, he got me into it, and I just, I really hunted a lot when I was, in junior high school, but I also did play 3 sports, so that kind of consumed my life. And then once I got into college, I played a little college baseball, and then once that kind of started petering out, that's when I really started taking more of a liking. Like, it really, hunting kind of took over for baseball for me. It was like, I'm not going to be able to play baseball for the rest of my life, so hunting is something that I really enjoy, and I can do that. So, I kind of took over there. And then, honestly, the habitat side of things, it's been something that's I've always looked at and, read things and everything, but it was something that I never really got into. It's something I wanted to do. But the farm that I grew up on, so my great uncle owns my family farm, and it's 215 acres. Well, he is a logger, so they don't hunt it, but they use the timber on it. So honestly, we weren't really able to cut, any trees unless it was for like shooting lanes or, stuff like that. We really couldn't go in and hinge cut. And I found out that the hard way too, because I went in there one day and just started cutting, and I got my ass reamed after they walked up on and found all this timber, all these new popple growth and everything. And I'm like, well, I better not do that, So it kind of took a backseat, but I always did food plots. Food plots were always something that I did, growing up, seeing everybody on TV, like Lee and Tiffany, seeing these lush clover plots, and like, oh, I need one of those to kill, bucks. And I'm here to tell you that is so far from the truth that it's not even funny. So I learned that the hard way as well, is when you're sitting on a food plot and it grows really well, but there's no deer in front of you because they watched you walk into your stand. So I had, a lot of growing pains, and I'm going to sit here and tell you, like, I'm not an expert at any of this. This was all trial and error, and I'm really starting to think that I'm kind of honing in on what works for me. And in 2014, my wife's brother bought an 80 acres, and he bought a 40. So, and it's divided up by a half-mile dirt road. So there's 120 acres, but it is all farmland, and there's 1 acre of timber on the 80 acres that's in the northeast corner of it. There's just 1 acre, and it's a triangle. And then on the other 40, there's like a 3 acre patch of timber. And so this country, and Jared, you said you went to CMU, so this is, in the Mount Pleasant area, so you kind of know the terrain around here. And the farm country, there's wooded fence rows and, little spots of woods, like, maybe 20 acres might be your biggest one.
Oh, yeah, and they're kind square wood lots.
Yeah, yep. And they're kind of spread out. So, in 2014, that's kind of where it started with I call it the 1 acre, but it's actually 120 acres with a couple wooded fence rows. And the neighbors have some timber as well. But what helps is the hunter density in that square mile is not a lot. There's not a lot of hunters in it. And I think that's kind of how I've been able to, the last couple of years, get deer to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, and that helps. But, yeah, that's kind of how I got into, starting. I've always started doing the food plots, and then getting into this 1 acre, I can kind of break it down if you want to start there. But, yeah, that's kind of the lead into the habitat stuff. And honestly, habitat, and which you guys know has been the growing fad, if you will. It's like within the last couple of years, habitat is what everybody wants to do, and it's fun to do as well.
Yeah, no, we definitely are growing into it more and more, and we with the baiting being illegal in Michigan now, we didn't bait very much up at school in Mount Pleasant area. There's so much ag that it never really did anything, but a lot of people now have to rely on doing something else, like food plots or some timber stand improvement, or some early successional habitat, whatever it may be. So yeah, you're right. It is a larger subject of discussion now than it has been. So I can see why you see it that way now. So you're saying this is a 120 acre area, but there's 1 acre of timber kind of in one of the corners, you said, right?
Yep. So the northeast corner, there's 1 acre of timber on the 80, the section of the 80. Yep.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we get into you describing the 1 acre for us? Because that's what I've heard you talk about on your podcast, is how you're doing the same sort of stuff we talk about, and you keep saying 1 acre. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, 1 acre. That will be the smallest property we covered yet. So I mean, at least people understand that it's a part of a bigger area, but really, whether it's 5 acres or 10 acres, I mean, it's all part of a bigger block of land usually. So, I mean, it still kind of has some of the same principles here. You're still focusing on improving the habitat in one specific spot, whether it's 1, 5, 3, 40, exactly. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about the 1 acre, from maybe a mile-high view. What are we looking at? What's around it? And why you decided to start there?
Yeah, so the 1 acre it's an 80 acres that runs north and south. So it's got a few rolling hills to it, and there's two waterway ditches that come off of the west road that kind of work through it. So there is a little bit of topography change. Now the north fence line there's a few trees in it, not a lot. I mean, maybe 6 trees that are spaced out. And there is another 80 acres to the north of the 1 acre. So that is only beans or wheat every year. That farmer does not do corn, so it's only beans or wheat. Across the road is corn. It's been corn the last 2 years. And then the rotation on the 1 acre side, that farm ground right now is wheat right now, and it's the south 40 of it's going to be beans. So I'm kind of worried this year because of the food situation. I don't have a lot of it, but I did go and do some frost seeding within the 1 acre, and I did some resurrection clover from Killer Food Plots, and I'm not going to lie, man, it is coming up like crazy, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But so yeah, and then on the east side of the 1 acre, the neighbors, they have 100 acres that run east and west, and it's kind of a skinny 100. And there's warm season grasses that butts up to the 1 acre timber. And then it's got like an autumn olive ditch with water in it that comes off of it'd be the south point. So where the fence row hits my timber, that's a wood. My east fence row is all wooded, so that helps out. The biggest downfall of this 1 acre is it's off of the road at least 200 yards. So my access is very difficult, very, very difficult. Like the deer see you coming from a mile away, and it's hard to hunt. And I'm really starting to, figure that out now. And that's my next step, is try to figure out how to hunt it. And I got a plan in place this year that I really want to see if it works. But so he bought this land in 2000 and, well, this would be we're coming into the 4th year of it right here. So 2015. Or yeah, I think it would be 2015. I think he bought it. That was the first year on the farm. In this 1 acre of timber, it's got a water source. It's a little creek, and it's probably 4 feet in diameter, but it's always got water in it all year. It does not matter because it's the runoff from the ag fields. I've never seen it dry. There's at least a little water in it all year.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so that helps out. And it runs from, if you can picture it, it runs from the northwest corner basically all the way to the southeast corner. So it runs the whole length of the 1 acre. Well, when I first got this, I was like, awesome, excited to have more ground to hunt, but it's not a lot. So my wife and I hunted it a little bit that year. I only hung one stand on it, and I had a rifle blind on it for gun season for her. And she bow hunted it a couple years. We had some good bucks on there. What I mean by good bucks is we had probably 2 bucks that would be right at, Pope and Young, that were 3 years old, and all the other ones were, 2.5. And it was corn that first year. but the timber, you could see right through it. I mean, obviously 1 acre is not very big, but you could see right through it. I mean, it was all leaves on the ground. There was no, new successional growth. The canopy was up 40, 50 feet. There was no food in there. And honestly, that first year, I never saw a deer in that timber, not one time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so coming into that winter after that season, my wife's cousin, Cole Bechtel, he's been really big into hinge cutting and habitat longer than I have. So I kind of started picking his brain, and that's when I discovered Jake Illinger and Jeff Sturgis. And Jake Illinger has been a very big help of mine and is a super awesome guy and really knows his stuff when it comes to hinge cutting and habitat improvement. And but that winter, Cole and I went in there and decided to my whole plan that winter was to I was going to go on each side of that creek, and I was going to we were going to hinge cut along that whole thing on both sides to try to have more access coming in. So basically it was going to be for a blocker. It wasn't going to be for bedding. It was just blocks so I could get into a stand, or we could get in a stand, because I knew it was going to be beans the next year and it was going to be hard to get into any stand. Went in that next year and we did a little bit of hinge cutting, and I don't know if it worked much. My wife ended up having an encounter with a 130-inch deer in rifle season, and the gun wouldn't go off on her at 40 yards, and it would have been her biggest buck. And I'm in Missouri with Casey, and she's calling me. She's in the blind. She's like, this deer's out in front of me, and the gun won't go off, and I'm freaking out. And I'm like, why does this have to happen when I'm gone, But so that it kind of helped a little bit there. And coming into, which would have been the second season, had been that winter, that's when I really started to get serious. Cole and I really started trying to get a game plan, and that's when I called Jake. And I said, Jake, do you have any pointers? Or, he's like, how about this? I'll come up there and we'll do a day's worth of work if you want to do some film and everything, and we'll do a trade-off. And I'm like, great if you want to come up here. He came up here for one day. Yeah, and in about 5 hours, I learned so much. I didn't have enough paper and enough ink to write down everything that he was telling me. And honestly, the biggest thing, our number one goal was to get everything to the canopy, or get the canopy down for, more food, and try to get more grass growing up on the forest floor, because there was nothing. And we went through there and cut and cut and cut and thickened it up. It turned this 1 acre into like 5 acres, if that kind of makes sense.
Really?
A deer, yeah, you can't see through it anymore, even when, there's no leaves on. Like, it is just thick, and I've cut trails through it. And, coming into that, right to that hinge cut year when we did all that, that's kind of when everybody started hunting the buck beds kind of thing and looking for buck beds, and the bed hunting was big, the Dan Infaults and stuff like that. And I went through there and I found what I figured was like 2 different buck beds on 1 acre. So I was pretty excited about that.
Really?
And yeah, and everything I read up to this point, I should go back a little bit. Everything I read to this point was like, you need a canopy over these deer when you're creating beds and creating buck beds. Like, they need to feel secure. And so I was like, okay, everybody was telling me that. And so when we went and did the hinge cutting, that's kind of what we did. On the north end of it, we made a buck bed, and on the south end, we made like a doe family group, on the points. And I hung up 3 stands in 1 acre for different winds, and was like, well, let's see what happens. And what ended up happening was, in the middle of this 1 acre, it just so happened that when we cut everything, it left an opening, like probably 10 foot by 10 foot, not very big at all. And there was no canopy over it. It was wide open to the sky. But it was thicker than hair on a dog's back around it. Okay. And there was like trails going, it was the hub. It was basically the hub of a wheel. And I had trails going every which way around here. And my whole plan was to make trails everywhere in here for any exit for these deer. I wanted them to feel as safe as they can and as they could leave or, do whatever they can. But I just did not want a buck to be able to just walk the edge and see him. I wanted to make him have to come through this hub, and hopefully I was there. So when I was cutting trails, I would only go 5 to 8 yards, and then I'd make the trail turn, and then go another 5 to 8 yards and make the trail turn, and keep doing that. So it was like a zigzag pattern, because I wanted him to make him have to weasel his way through here to, like I said. So
you're talking about cutting trails zigzag through the already hinge cut and felled tree area, right?
Yeah, yep. And that was the plan. In my head, it was a great theory. Like, let's do this because, like I said before, deer could see through it, and you wouldn't make them go through there. So I wanted them to go through there. So this hub, there was a tree that we cut off. The hinge broke, and it wasn't a good hinge. So it's as tall as me. It's probably 5'10", and it's right in the middle, and it's right on the edge of this hub. So I'm like, one of the big things that Jake was telling me was, when you're doing these small acres, he's like, you really have to think differently. You literally have to stay out of here until you have every right scenario in your favor. Like, you cannot come in here at all until you come to hunt it. And I'm like, that was hard. That was a hard pill to swallow for me, because I love trail cams. I like getting pictures of deer, and I just like seeing the fruits of your labor. You know what I mean? I like going back and checking things out, and I told myself, I said, August 1st, I have to be out of here, done with everything. Like, that was my drop dead date, until the right wind, until the right, whatever, right scenario, I have to be out.
Aaron, I want to touch on a couple points there.
Yeah.
That you mentioned, and like checking trail cams, as I'm sure you know, maybe in other places like Illinois or Kansas, I think you can get away with a little bit more than you can in more of a pressured state. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think guys out there, I think you maybe can get away with checking it every day during your hunt, during the rut, or maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. And I'm not speaking totally in general, but certain situations allow you to check it if you're smarter about it. And I'm with you though. I can't check mine as often as I'd like. I feel like I do more damage than I do in good,
I mean, I couldn't agree with you guys anymore, because, like I said, I see it on a day-to-day basis. We're hunting Kansas and Ohio and, Missouri, Iowa. And honestly, I think it comes down to the pressure. All deer don't like the smell of humans and all that stuff. If you keep your scent control in check, you're going to be fine. I mean, I've seen when we were out in Kansas, we'd go in midday and check a camera and then leave and come back and sit in that stand that was right over that camera and have, a booner walk underneath of us. I mean, 100%, and walk right by the camera and not have in daylight hours, And Michigan, I mean, I'm taking this approach from now on all my farms or any ground that I hunt in Michigan, and you just got to stay out of there. And I'm not saying don't use the cameras, but I took a totally different approach to cameras last year when I was coming into last year. After all the hinge cutting and everything, what I did is I put a camera in the 1 acre. That's what I was going to say. I put it in the 1 acre looking at that hub. And I said, I'm literally not touching this unless I come in here and hunt. Because my whole thought on that camera was, I want to see what happens for next year. I want to see if deer moving through. All I want to see is if deer were moving through here and what they were doing, what times of day they're moving through there, and what if they're bucks or what it is. And the other cameras I put on like a single tree out in the middle of a fence row, the only tree by itself. And I put a licking branch right there, and I said, this is straight inventory. I was not hunting anywhere near it. You look at this tree, I mean, I could show you this tree, and you'd be like, there's no deer that are going to come by this tree. And I swear to you, I had every buck. And I said, I don't care if it's at night or if it's, in the daylight. I do not care what time of day it is. I just want to know if these deer are here and what's here. And man, it worked. It worked to a T. And that is kind of my approach going forward now is getting inventory And then my cameras I'm using for the following year for, any historical data, if anybody believes in that, which I kind of do.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to back up a little bit, Aaron. This 1 acre, a lot of people can relate to that. I think a lot of our listeners' ears are perking up while we're talking about this. I just wanted to back up and get a little more details on, was this more of a just an opportunity that came along and you thought you'd go check it out, or is this something that you saw and thought, boy, I bet you I could do something with this because it's the only cover in all this open farm ground? What was your thought process when you came upon this?
Well, so I have some friends that hunt in this, relatively the same area, the same topography, the same farm ground, and consistently they're killing, good deer every year. And what it's doing, I mean, they're killing deer like 160, 150, 160 inch deer on 3 acres of timber. And I'm like, how's this work? I mean, it's mostly happening in the rut. So it's like kind of luck of the draw. Like you got to be there when a buck's cruising, it's just, you got to kind of take a chance. I mean, all these woodlots are usually out in the middle of sections. So you look like a turd walking across the field trying to get in here, and it's like you're hoping like you're not blowing anything out of that timber. and it's just the chance you got to take, and I kind of saw that. And then when my brother-in-law bought this ground, I looked at this and I'm like, you know what? This is a challenge for me. I'm going to try to take on this new challenge and see if I can make something of it, and it's kind of how I started my podcast in a way, because I was scouring the internet for small acres. And when I mean small acres, I was looking for 5 or less acres to see what other guys were doing in pressured states to improve their habitat. And I'm not kidding you, I couldn't find one thing. I couldn't find a video. I couldn't find a article or written anything. I couldn't find a guy like all of us, everyday average, blue collar working guys that are doing something. And I needed some like insight. And my brother, or my wife's cousin Cole, he helped me out a ton. And, so that was kind of what stemmed my podcast in a way, is because the thought in my head was like, I want to get these guys on here that, not a lot of people have heard of. They're doing extraordinary things. And, Greg Litzinger out in, New Jersey could have a scenario that, you, Brian, have in Ohio that might be a same type of timber or same type of bedding area or something. And you're like, all I want is that one person to listen to the podcast and be like, man, light bulb, I have that same scenario Greg did, and he entered this way. And, that was my whole thing behind my podcast as well. And that's how it kind of started. But it was more of a challenge. I wanted to see if I could, get on deer that were 3.5 years and older consistently. And, everybody wants to kill a buck every year. You do. I mean, and I would be lying to you if I said I wouldn't be excited if I didn't. But my success has kind of changed over the last couple of years having this ground. It's went from, okay, I want to try to figure out how to get bucks to be here, hold the does. I want to try to figure out how to hold the does and make some food, because I can't put any food plots on the property because it's all ag. So what's that challenge? And then I want to figure out how to hunt it. And then I want to try to figure out how to consistently have 3.5-year-old bucks cruise this in daylight hours. And I mean, I'm not kidding. The last year was unbelievable in what happened.
That's a great point, because a lot of people think that you have to have so much ground. And I think, like you said, Aaron, starting your podcast, there is some information that's starting to get out there. Guys are starting to realize that, first of all, a lot of us can't afford big properties. And even the 40-acre blocks that were more reasonable 10, 20 years ago are starting to get out of the range of a lot of blue-collar people. So I've got friends that are looking at 10 acres, 5 acres, picking them up and doing amazing things with them. So I think that's really good to draw attention to that, because unfortunately, hunting's getting a bad rap that it's becoming a rich man's sport, and in a way, that's happening. But we can also stop making excuses and feeling sorry for ourselves and look at opportunities like you did instead of saying, oh, crap, it's 1 acre. I'm not even going to waste my time. You're saying, hey, challenge accepted. Let's do it. And look what you're doing with it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more on that, because if you drove by this 1 acre, you'd be like, you wouldn't look at it and it wouldn't be like a globe around it being like, that's the 1 acre you need. You know what I mean? It's not like that. And I kind of wanted to document it throughout my podcast as well. And I'm not going to lie, probably my listeners are probably getting losing the podcast because I mention it so much, but I'm just trying to get the awareness out there of, literally, like you said, it does not matter how much ground you have, as long as you have the right piece, and you can make it into a good piece. Behind my house right here, my neighbor owns 20 acres, and he's not really a hunter. He gun hunts, and man, I tell my wife every day, how much I would love to buy this piece, because it's perfect ground to mold. It's in a good state to be able to make it the way I would want to make it. And it might take me 8-10 years to kill a good buck on it, but you know what? That's what's fun for me. The process is actually more fun for me than, the end goal. And like I said, that's kind of that's changed my success, what I think is success, over the last couple of years.
Well, and to further expound on both of you guys' points, I think, Brian, you nailed it on the head as well, as you did as well, Aaron. You start out with 1 or maybe 5 or 10 or 15, and then you learn. We're all doing this to learn. I'm learning what to do. I'm learning what not to do every time I'm out there. I'm learning not to plant 300 miscanthus rhizomes with a shovel and a drill. I will never do that again. But I know that now, and I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't out there trying it or doing it. You can listen to this stuff, you can read about it, watch videos, whatever. Until you get out there and do it, it's the whole learning experience. So maybe someday, if I'm lucky enough, and like Brian said, work hard enough and set my goals high enough, I can maybe buy a bigger farm. Brian, you didn't start out on 40. You had a 25-acre farm before that. You worked your way into it, too. Everybody,
right.
You can work your way into it. So starting small is definitely not a bad thing. And like you said, Aaron, we all kill nice deer on these small properties. So it can be done. It's not going to happen all the time, $2 a season or whatever, but just get out there and keep compounding your growth and your profit from each farm and roll that into a bigger one. And you just keep going and going. So you starting the challenge with your 1 acre, me with my 15, Brian with your 25, and now you're 40. The next piece, whatever that is, we're all going to know what not to do, and we're all going to know what really worked. So it's kind of it doesn't hurt to get out there and start.
For sure. And, to kind of go back as well, and to your question about, why did you want to get into the project of the 1 acre? Well, honestly, which you guys know, Michigan's always been a bait state, and it isn't anymore. And, my deer camp with my dad and uncles and, their friends, I grew up a bait hunter. That's what we did. And you hunt one stand over the whole course of the year, and you wait for a deer to come to you. And I feel like in some way, I felt like my woodsmanship kind of plateaued at an early age in a way, because I was relying on bait. I was relying on the deer coming to me. And honestly, the last 3 years of doing this, trial and error and kind of throwing myself to the fire, I've learned so much in the last 3 years of how to do things and how to implement different tactics. And okay, maybe I better not do that again, and just kind of take a step back and be more of a patient hunter in a way, and going in at the right time and doing the things I should and staying the heck out of there. I can't express that enough. And just resist the temptation and take up basket weaving if you have to in the summer, just so you keep yourself busy, because just so you don't go out there. I'm telling you.
Well, Aaron, nice job bringing it right back to where we left off, buddy. You were talking how you stay out from come August 1st? Is that right?
Yeah, August 1st is my last day to even set foot on that property. And
Wow. Okay, so 2 months out. Okay.
yep. So I'll kind of come into this last deer season because this is when everything really started working out. And so on the 1 acre, 80 acre, it's an 80 acres on that piece. So it would be the southwest corner of it, there is an old farmstead. It's got a house on it. Well, it doesn't have a house anymore. We tore it down. My wife and I are going to build there in the next couple years. And it's got 3 barns on there, and my brother-in-law holds, some of his implements and tractors there and everything. Well, it's the highest point of the whole property is where where the barns are. So I can pull up there and I can glass the whole 120 acres from there, and I can see everything. So that was going to be my biggest thing going into this year. I was going to stay way back, and there was beans all around me. It was all beans. So I'm like, I'm just going to, just try to film all these deer. And I wanted to know where these deer were bedding, and I found out where they were bedding, and it wasn't on me. And this was all summer, like velvet. So I just filmed all these deer, and there was a deer. So back when my brother-in-law bought the farm, there was a deer. He was 2.5 at the time. He only grew one side with a spike on one side, and he was a 2-year-old. He was there all year, and with some other bucks, and coming into being a 3-year-old, which would have been not last year but the year before, he was still there, and he was a ghost. I got a couple velvet pictures of him, but he got a little bigger, but same thing, one good side and then one spike. And then this year, I didn't know if he was still alive or not, and he showed back up, and he was a tank. He was 4.5, and I ended up calling him Jim Abbott because of any baseball fans. Jim Abbott was a big pitcher out there in the majors, and he was born only with one good hand, and I kind of took a spin off baseball there, and so I named him Jim Abbott. And like I said, as a 3-year-old, he was a ghost, and I watched him all summer in the beans and filmed him, and along with some other really decent deer, really good deer. And so that was my plan, just stay back, not go on the farm. Literally, I was going to drive up the driveway of the homestead or and glass, and then I was going to pull back out, and that was it. And it worked because the 1 acre, that camera was running all year, and I didn't go into the 1 acre. So my last time in there was like I said, like August 1st. I didn't go into the 1 acre until November, oh boy, like the 10th, 11th, something like that.
Nice job.
So I wanted to go in so bad in early October,
that was
so
tough,
bad.
I bet. Jeez.
Because, and I don't know if you guys remember or not, we got a really good cold front in October this year. It was October 10th through like the 14th.
We had a couple of them, but that one was the first really good one. Yep.
Yep, and the only thing that kept me out of the 1 acre in that cold front was the wind was never right. It was never right, so the only stand I had for that wind was across the road on the 40 acres, and that's got a 3-acre patch of woods. And I had a stand on a field edge, and it was October 13th, I believe it was, and so I have to walk through an ag field to get to this stand, and you're growing up and you always learn all these things and read all these things like, don't go through fields in the mornings because you're going to kick a lot of deer out. And I'm like, well, maybe, just maybe, me going in really early under the cover of darkness, maybe I can get into that stand and have, hopefully something will come by me. And I got in the stand early, and I could only hunt until I want to say it was 8 o'clock. I think it was 8. I only had like an hour and 15 minutes to hunt that morning.
And refresh and real quick, which stand and which date, just to be sure.
So this is in Michigan. It's on across the road from the 1 acre. So
okay.
It's in the 3-acre patch on the 40 acres. Yep.
And that was what date?
October 13th.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yep. So I went in there and just slithered my way through the beans as slow as I could. I got to the timber. I didn't have to go through the timber. I was going to go on the edge, and there was a deer. I kicked up a deer and ran into the timber that I was going to hunt on the edge of, blowing and blowing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just stop. But every time I figured it was a doe, every time she'd blow, I would just keep walking, just like hurry up, get in your stand, and just maybe something will happen. Daylight came and cracked, and she blew again, and I'm like, seriously? Like, you can't smell me, you can't see me, like, what are you doing? So I was sitting there, and I hadn't seen a deer. No, I saw a little buck come out of the neighbors and kind of work over to my bean field. It's a bean field that I'm on, inside corner, and I kind of look up about 600 yards away, and I'm like, man, that's a big deer. And in a different patch of timber, and I picked the binos up, and it was Jim Abbott, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the first time that I've seen him on the hoof in a stand. And I'm like, wow, it's like he's big. Like, I could tell his body size was just ginormous, and his neck was so big. I've never seen a deer in Michigan with a neck that big in October, So he started working the edge of the timber, kind of coming my way. He had a long way to come, and I lost sight of him. And usually what happens is when deer get into this section of timber on the neighbors, I know exactly where they're going to pop out. So I'm like, just maybe he'll pop out there. And when he pops out, he'll be at 100 yards. So I'm sitting in there, and I'm texting my buddies and my wife, and I'm like, I've got to get out of the stand here in literally like 15 minutes. And I have to. Like, I got to. And all of a sudden I look up, and he pops out at 100 yards, and I'm like, oh boy. Like, please. I'm sitting on the edge of the only timber to get him from that section to the next section. So I'm like, just please come cruise this timber, please. And he walks to the fence row, and he walks right up the fence row to me on a string. And I shot him at 18 yards.
No way.
And yeah, well, it was good until I released. And it happened fast. I didn't cut a lot of lanes in this tree because, like I said, I was sitting like a turd in a punch bowl out there because I'm on the edge of the timber and not a lot of foliage. So it was like a do or die kind of thing. I hit him high, and I could tell I hit him high in the shoulder. And he ran out in the field 80 yards, started licking himself. My arrow came out, and I watched him walk off the field the same way he came. And when he got in the timber, I'm just like freaking out. I'm like, what just happened, And I got down and took the long way out, and I actually had to go to a funeral that morning for my best friend. His mom had passed away, and so I went to the funeral, and we did the funeral stuff all day. I never even would have looked at my arrow or nothing, and I waited all day until basically last light that night and went and got my arrow. I had 8 inches of penetration. The broadhead broke off in him, and I tracked him for 4 hours that night and found very little blood. My plan was to, get a search party ready for the next day, searched all that day, and 2 woodlots over, I found blood. And where I lost blood to where I found blood, it was literally like a needle in a haystack. It was 600 yards from where I lost blood to where I found blood. I was just looking on the leaves, and my dad was there, and I'm like, wow, here's blood.
Nice job.
Yeah. And I brought my dog with me and another dog just to maybe they'd get a scent maybe, and maybe he'd be dead. But he was running towards the only standing corn in the section. And this standing corn is huge. This field is over 100 acres at least. And kicked him up in the corn, and 6 days later he showed back up on camera, and he was fine. And yep. And then so I hunted him the rest of the year. Make a super long story a little shorter. Hunted him the rest of the year. Saw him 8 times. Saw him a couple times with a gun. Never could get on him. One night I had him at 350 yards with a gun, but he was just over the fence line, property line. I could not shoot him. And then December 18th, he got hit by a car and died in the ditch of the farm.
Oh, no.
Yep. So, and then just more salt to the wound, I got a salvage tag and everything to go get him after work, and right before I got there, within an hour before I got there, somebody had cut his antlers off.
Jeez.
So, yep. But I guess that story is kind of like, it's kind of I don't know. He's Jim Abbott's the story of he was a 4-year-old that showed up so much. He was on every camera in daylight all year, and he lived in the 1 acre. I have 100 pictures of him in that 1 acre in the daylight, chasing does through that hub, bedding there. Yeah. I mean, he lived in it, lived in 1 acre, and that was his little domain. And then when I shot him, another buck had come in, a 3.5-year-old that I had another opportunity at too, and I wasn't able to get a shot off. But after I shot Jim and he kind of moved out, that deer moved in, and he took it over. And kind of to go back to the point where I said a little bit ago about everything I read, you had to have a canopy over these deer and over these bucks. This happened by happenstance. It was by accident. I had this camera on this hub. Like I said, I wanted to get just see what the movement was. And what I was finding is that all these bucks were bedding in this little 10 by 10 area with no canopy over them. They would bed there all day. I had a buck sit there and bed there for 7 hours one day in the daylight. All day he was there. And I have every picture of it. Like, he came in from the north, and it was crazy how it happened, because he came in with the wind to his nose, and he bedded down with the wind to his back. So he came in from the north, and when he bedded down, he watched his trail coming in, for any danger or anything, and he had the wind to his back, so he could smell everything behind him. And then about 4 hours in, he got up and kind of stretched and resituated and turned around and bedded back down facing south. And a trigger kind of went off in my head, and I'm like, why did he do that? So I went to Weather Underground. I don't know if you guys know the website Weather Underground.
Yeah.
So I went on to Weather Underground because it's like one of the only websites that you can go back and look at the day and see what the weather, everything was. I went to that day, and I'm not kidding, it was within 10 minutes of him getting up and kind of resituating himself. The wind, it switched from the south, and it was coming out of the north. So he situated himself for the wind to be to his back so he could smell behind him still and look for anything coming downwind. It was unbelievable.
And how far did he move, Aaron, from one spot to the other?
He just stood up and stretched it and sat right back in his same bed.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, he didn't move far at all. He just got up, like I said, did some, and I have a succession of pictures for 7 hours of this deer doing that.
Oh, wow.
And,
wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. And
so you kind of found that out by accident, huh? I mean, like, everybody talks about the canopy, like you said, and there's a ton of guys I know who don't like the canopy and will never put a canopy over a deer's head or try to create a canopy, which is cool too. I mean, you're really different strokes for different folks, and different tools in your arsenal. I've seen it work. I've seen it work without the canopy. So it's interesting how you kind of did that by accident, and that's where they like to bed.
Yeah, and coming into this year, I just had checked that same camera. I never moved that camera. I actually put it on video mode, and I just checked it last weekend. I went back and checked the frost seeding, which is coming up unbelievable. And I've got 6 bucks that are living in there right now all together, and all of them will bed down in that little opening right now as a bachelor group. Yeah, it's opened up my eyes to, going back to like the habitat and hinge cutting and how to do it. And like you said, different strokes for different folks and everything. But I have found in my scenario is that like these deer, I just feel like if you go a little bigger than 10 by 10, it might be too big for them. I think it's just perfect size to where they feel secure, but there's enough trail systems to get out and where they can see. And, I just think they just feel really secure in there. And, there's nothing above them. They get sunlight, they get shade. I put food there. There's water. They literally can stand up and walk 10 yards and get a drink of water and come back and lay back down, and honestly, it kind of hurt me in a way though, because now it's hard to hunt it. I need to figure out how to hunt it because the deer just want to be in there so much, you know.
Now, is that
Now,
in
Aaron,
this...
oh,
go ahead,
do
B.
you have cameras out all year?
I do run cameras all year, and everybody calls me crazy, but
Do you find that the deer, the population is pretty stable year round, or do you see shifts with more deer at certain times of the year than others?
so on the 1 acre, when it hits, I'm gonna say January 1. When January 1 comes, I won't get a picture of a deer until March or April. They're just gone. There's north of me, there's a big section of timber that's like all wooded, and I think there's more opportunity for them there for more food, because in my area it's lacking food. You know, the farmers get the crops off and there's nothing. It's barren, and I think they just leave. So within those 2 to 3 months, I don't see deer at all. But then now, you know, getting into turkey season in April and stuff like that, the deer come back full force. And, you know, and on my 1 acre there, I can't tell you that I'm holding deer, but deer love to be there.
Sure.
You know, I'm getting, you know, a couple thousand pictures every month, you know, that I have the camera out. So, and it's, like I said, it's only on that little, I put that resurrection clover in there, and, you know, for frost seeding, and they are loving it, and they love to bed in it. They love to eat it. They love just to play in it. And I love watching it.
No, that's interesting. I was telling Brian and our buddy Al, I was out at my place on Monday morning, and I had beds in my clover as well. 2 or 3 of them. Must have been a little doe family or something. But it was already like 12-inch high clover too. It's
Really?
yeah. It's, you know, it's like end of May. Yeah, I mean, it's been a established plot from last year, but so it's got a good start. And I did frost seed it again like you did as well, Aaron. But it's they do like that clover.
Yeah, it's in that clover blend that that Nick. I don't know Nick personally. I think you guys kind of work with him.
Yeah.
I got that clover blend, that resurrection, man. That stuff is unbelievable. And like I said, I don't have a horse in the race. You know, I bought his bag of clover one year, and I'm like, I'm gonna throw this out and see what happens. And man, I'm impressed with it.
Yeah, he puts a lot of time and research into his stuff before it comes to market. It's really fascinating that if you ever get a chance to run into him at a show or talk to him over the phone, it's his mindset. He's so passionate about it, and he won't put anything out there that he hasn't tested and made it 100% before it gets to that point.
Yeah, for sure.
I just had another follow-up on the differences you might see between corn and beans with this 1 acre. Is there any? We talked about the shift with the time of year. How about with the crop rotations? Do you notice any differences in the movement or the deer numbers when it's corn versus beans?
So the year that it was corn was the first year that we had the farm, and it was literally, I threw up one stand and, you know, put up a camera and just wanted to kind of know what was there. And we honestly didn't hunt it. My wife and I didn't hunt it a lot that year. She bow hunted it more. She passed up a buck that she probably should have took with her bow. But she just wanted something a little bigger, and, you know, that's what it's a goal of hers. But that year with corn, you know, I had a lot of bucks that would be around that noon time frame in the rut that would be just cruising on the edge of the corn, in between the corn and the timber. Like I said, I never saw a deer in the timber on there that first year. Now, I was worried when it went from corn to beans 2 years in a row, and I'm like, oh, how's this gonna work? You know, this is like, there's no cover anymore, you know. And honestly, last year I was so surprised. I hunted like 4 days in a row and saw a 3.5-year-old buck or bigger in the daylight hours 4 days in a row. And some of, you know, I can see so far, so, you know, a couple were too far away, but I was still, you know, patrolling their movements and what they were doing, you know. And it's crazy to me how, you know, it's I think us as hunters, and we look at like these open fields and it's like there would never be a deer out there. But I'm telling you, like, we're not at the farm all the time, like, to see everything and what goes on. It's amazing to me how deer just walk across a wide open field. I mean, a field you're talking about, you could see your dog run away for 2 days. You stand on a beer can, you can see him run away for 3. You know, and it's like they just walk.
Flat up there.
You know,
All right.
yeah, and it's crazy, and you know that it kind of, when it comes gun season, that kind of ends, you know, because most of those deer get shot. But you know, it just makes you scratch your head, like, what the hell is he doing out there? Like, why is he out there? And then that makes you think, like, okay, he's doing that in that area for some reason. And I had that happen to me, you know, like I said, there were some topography changes in this field. Well, there is a section of timber that the deer literally have a runway across the road, and the topography change, I mean, is nothing. It's hardly any. I mean, if you were to ride a dirt bike down this thing, you probably couldn't even make a jump out of it. But it's a little divot in the field that they just like to be in the little divot. You know, they think they're out of the way of everything, but they use it all the time. And it's like those little things, just don't overlook them. And, you know, I'm starting to think too, I was always thought like you can't kill, you know, a 3.5, 4.5-year-old deer on a field edge in Michigan. I'm here to tell you, if you got the right situation and you do the right things, play the wind, and you have good access, you can do it. You can do it, and it, you know, just be smart about it.
Sure. Now, tell me about your scent control. This type of a setup, you have to get in and out. Are you big on it? Do you not so much carry, just play the wind, or what's your approach?
I'm okay. I'm pretty big on it. Playing the wind 100%. I don't really push it much. If it's like a iffy wind, it depends on how hard the wind's blowing, or you know. But I'm playing the wind all the time. But scent control is, you know, a tub that I've got like 3 tubs, scent lock tubs that they make, you know, those green and gray, you know, gray lids. I use those. I am a freak when it comes to dirt wafers. I love dirt wafers. You can call me old school. You can call me weird. My wife, it's like my scent all year. It's like I put it on me like cologne, you know. I love that smell. But I put those in my bow case. I put them in my quivers, on my arrows. Like, I put wafers in my truck everywhere. I wash my clothes. You know, with scent-free soap, and I don't spray down though. I don't know. I'm not sold on scent-free spray. I have in the past a lot, but I don't know. There's nothing that really like out there proves to me that it's you know, it works that good. I don't know. I use an Ozonics.
Sure.
I'm a firm believer in Ozonics. I really am. I never was until my buddy basically put it in my pack one night and told me to use his, and he's like, literally, just try this. And I was in Missouri, and I hunted with it for 8 days, and I had mature does, mature bucks downwind, and never got blown at one time. And I went and got one myself, and I don't go in the stand without an Ozonics. I'm a firm believer in them. And a lot of times, you know, people say they're gimmicky. You know, I thought the same thing, but you know, it's expensive. They're expensive to try them, but I don't know. I'm just a firm believer in them.
What Aaron's trying to say is there's any Onyx guys out there listening in, we'd be to try them out, and a lot of feedback for you.
Yeah, and I don't have a horse in that race either. I'm not sponsored by Ozonics or nothing. It's just something I believe in and I use. ScentLock's coming out with a Oz machine that's kind of like an Ozonics. They really actually have a new bag system that I really like that I started using last year. It's where this unit goes in the bag, and it's got perforated tubes that go throughout the bag, and you plug it in, and it's an O2 generator or Oz generator that puts that basically that ozone in and breaks down the stuff in your clothes, and that's kind of the extent of my scent control. I always wear knee-high boots, rubber boots. I always tuck my boots in. I hate doing it, but I always do it. And there's a couple things that go against me. I hate wearing gloves. If I wear gloves, they're fingerless gloves. It doesn't matter how cold they are or how cold it is. I just do not like wearing gloves. I don't know. It's just a thing I have. I don't wear gloves. And I always wear a neck gaiter. I feel like a neck gaiter is pivotal to have. And I always, pull it up over my nose because a lot of that scent comes out of your mouth. And I wear a lot of ball caps, like trucker caps. And I started trying to get away from that a little bit last year and wearing a beanie that I also wash in scent-free soap and do all that stuff to it, just to kind of keep that bad smell out of my hair, just kind of keep that trapped in. But that's about it. I don't like wiping down my bow with anything because everything rusts on it, and I don't really want a rusty bow because you pay so much money for them all the time.
Oh man, it sounds like our buddy Brent's Hoyt all the time.
Oh yeah. Let me tell you about Brent.
Oh yeah.
I actually talked to him today because he wants me to use your band for the Total Archery Challenge. So.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's why he called me earlier. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, you're more than welcome. I already paid for it, so.
That's what he said. He's like, I'm going to steal. He said when you couldn't come up there and shoot, he's like, I'm going to steal your band and give it to somebody else. So, but I feel like I'm second fiddle because he already asked all of his friends. So, and then he's doing, he's calling me and wanting me to come up. So,
oh, what a
thanks a lot,
turd.
buddy, if you're listening to this.
What a turd, Brent. Yeah, we're going to make sure you listen to this one. Yeah. Well, Aaron, I think what we've gone over, we've basically gone through where you started in terms of hunting and habitat management and where you're at now. And whether it's just the hinging and all the habitat work that you've done, opening up the canopy in your 1 acre, to, I noticed you pay a lot of attention to scouting cameras. More so than a lot of people do. That, I would say, is equally as important to everything we've talked about.
Oh, yeah.
Even the wind and the access. We beat on access on this podcast just because
Huge.
small properties, you have to do it right, or you blow the property out and you're done. And a small property doesn't recycle as fast as, something bigger where you can spread out. So all those things, your scent control as well. I think it's just a really good episode, kind of just like you said, like a BS session about how you do it, where you're at, and what works for you. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did well too. I'm sorry I probably talked most of the time. Wouldn't let you guys get a word in edgewise and probably went off on a tangent there, but
no, you're good. That's why you have a podcast, and that's why, as a good host does, he sits back and listens to his guests. So I know I wanted to make sure that we cover everything you want to cover, though. Is there anything else that we haven't covered so far that you think we might have missed?
We could go on for hours, like breaking down, like you guys know. We could break down different types of hinges and, and what to do and what trees to hinge and what not to hinge. We could do that at a later time, but I think the biggest thing that I kind of, from my experience, that I want to let everybody know and just to think about a little more, and I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying I'm a expert at this by any means. This is just going off of what I've learned and my experiences. And when you're hunting small acres like this, like you guys just said, access is number one. But I think in a lot of times, I think we give deer too much credit in a lot of ways. Like when I went in there to hunt Jim Abbott, it's like a rule out there. I don't know whoever wrote it that said, deer feed in fields at all night, which they do. I'm not saying they don't. But, a lot of people say you can't get into a stand through a field. If you have the right scenario, like that's one of those things that I feel like you got to push the envelope sometimes and go for broke. And that's kind of what I did in a way in getting in there. I just didn't execute the shot. I did kick a deer out, but luckily for me, it wasn't the deer that I was after. And I would just kind of take a step back and be a little more patient and kind of as you break everything down, break it down one more step into kind of a granular form. And when you see a deer do something, ask why. Why did that do that? Why they're doing it for some reason, and just think outside the box every once in a while. And if you have to go through a field in the morning, get in there really, really early. I mean, I was sitting in my stand just breathing, waiting for daylight for like an hour and a half. It's something you don't want to do, but it paid off, Well, in some sense it did. I had my opportunity, I just didn't capitalize.
Hey,
so
that was a successful hunt, man, no matter which way you look at it. You got the opportunity, so.
Yeah. I guess that would be just my biggest thing. And this year I'm gonna, which I might ask you guys a little bit more about, is I've got Border Patrol for a food plot and along for access and everything, and that's something I've never planted it. And the reason why is I'm too afraid to plant it because everybody doesn't have good luck with it, and it's like, don't do that, so I need to know a little more about that and trying to plant some Border Patrol, and I need to get it in the ground quick here, probably, I'm starting to think.
Yeah, I know.
Funny you mentioned that because I just got some planted and did a lot of filming, and I'll be sharing that here on our YouTube channel here in the next week or two.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that because I need some work on my green thumb.
Well, if you keep listening to us, you might learn one thing or two. It might not be the right thing, but you'll learn something. And I know that I've planned that Killer Food Plots Border Patrol in the past. I think Nick said you want to have it in by, he told me 1st of June before, but I think you can push that a little bit. I'm going to have to push that because I'm still in a swamp in my food plots.
Right.
So, but that, I mean, you could make what they call the Border Patrol hallway to your 1 acre. You could make a 10 or 15 foot wide strip from your access point to your 1 acre. And when it's, 4, 5, 6 foot tall, or even before that, you could mow a path or spray a path right down the middle of it for you to walk through. It only has to be shoulder width. The deer will find that probably too tight and too compact to walk through. They probably won't even walk down it. So that could get you across that field whenever you want, really.
And don't forget about smoke screen. Smoke screen supposedly does a little bit better in less desirable soils. That's another product that he come out with. That if you've got the pH is a little bit lower, or if it's a little wetter area, that smoke screen might be a better choice for you.
Okay, I've got that on my family farms. I got some low pH, and it's pretty sandy, and it's in between two. My plot, I've done it for the last 8 or 10 years. My plot is in between two pine grove thickets, basically, and those pines rip a lot of nutrients out of the ground. From my experience, and I can get buckwheat or buck forage oats and stuff to grow in there, but I'm probably not doing everything I should be doing. But that's another one of those instances where it's a perfect little hidey hole food plot, but I need some Border Patrol for some more access, and that's what you lack the most in more scenarios than not is access. I can't beat it to death any more than that. It's hard. It's hard to find perfect entry and exit, and your exit's just as important as your entry.
No doubt.
Yeah, and I know I use that Border Patrol on my place for access. That's why I plan it. I'm able to walk from where I park down past my main food plot area to more of a transition area I like to hunt when it gets into November. And that stuff, 10, 12 foot tall at least. You can hit it with nitrogen when it's growing, and that'll really help it boost. So there's really a few ways to it. Like you said, access and cover are usually the ways you get busted. So if you can, I'm taking also some Border Patrol, and I'm running it through my food plots this year to where they won't be just wide open. They're going to be broken up into two, and they're going to have random spots of cover all over the place. So it's going to be more of a maze and pocket effect.
Oh, yeah.
Where, that'll help me also get by here and there, but it's going to help them feel more secure and make those bucks run around more, sniff around more, looking for other does in there versus just peeking out, looking across the food plot, and maybe moving on. So, there's a couple different uses for that stuff, and it's a good product though. He's got some great quality seed.
Yeah, for sure, and I've been impressed with it. So I'm gonna probably get some more stuff and try it out a little bit more. I like your idea with putting it through the food plot, and you're kind of doing the same thing that I did with the 1 acre, and you're just making it so the deer have to stop a little bit and take their time through it, and figure it out, and instead of just going down the downwind side and just scent check it and being gone without going through it. I mean, that's another point. Just make them have to go through that stuff to give you an opportunity. And you can create funnels, which you guys know. You can create funnels in a lot of different ways, either with hinge cutting or border patrol, or different ways to go by your stand. And that's what's so intriguing to me. And I had 3 stand sites in the 1 acre, and I made funnels by each stand, but I wasn't able to hunt it much. And that's just the cards you're dealt sometimes. And this year I'm taking a step back, and I've got 1 stand in the 1 acre now where I'm going to leave it. I got 1 on 1 point, and then I'm actually going to utilize a box blind on the edge on an inside corner where my access, I can get behind, this box blind down the wood line, and I can enter it, and I can get into this box blind and still be able to shoot a bow out of, and I can be within 80 yards of, where these bucks are going to be bedding, and I just got to hope they got to, come by me. So that's going to be my biggest change this year is kind of using that box blind a little bit for 1 scent, 2 access, and not like, it's almost like an observation stand, but there's no trees right there, so I got to do with what I can do, and just kind of, I'm still there, but maybe I can get them to kind of come out in the inside corner of the ag field and, get an opportunity that way.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you was what do you have on your list for new projects for the 1 acre this year? Anything else besides that?
So what I did was Cole and I went in there this winter, and it would be the west edge of the 1 acre timber, there's a lot of like crabapple trees, which hinge pretty well. But they're just bushy trees that like really don't do a lot, and the canopy's up a little higher. So we went through there and hinged a lot of them, and just to thicken up the edge so I could, walk in, it was all just for access and just thicken it up even more, because I don't really want to tamper with a lot inside now, because I've got my structure there, and the deer really liked it last year. So I'm going to see if it happens again this year and then kind of go from there. But honestly, I don't have a lot of more trees to hinge. I mean, there's a few in there. Actually, there's quite a few, but I want to leave some trees in there too. That was the biggest thing. And then on that inside corner, I needed a reason for those deer to come out in that inside corner by the box blind. So what we did is we created a funnel off of one of the main trail systems. We created a funnel that we're making them have to go to that inside corner, and so that was the biggest changes. And like I said, that frost seeding, that's a game changer right now. It's unbelievable how that's coming up. And I planted the trail systems as well. That came up okay, but the deer are just walking the trail so much that it's just like getting trampled. I mean, it's all the trails are down to mud. They like it a lot. And so that's the biggest thing. I mean, and then just keep my butt out of there. So.
Yeah, a lot of good information, Aaron. I appreciate you sharing it with us. One thing that really struck me early on in our conversation, and I hope our listeners picked up on it. I love how you keep your goals realistic. I mean, a guy like you working with the Kiefer brothers and going to all these places and filming these big bucks, it could be really easy to get starstruck and buck fever and think to yourself, well, I'm not shooting anything but 140s, 150s, et cetera. But I just love how you come out and said, we got some Pope and Young bucks, and 125-inch buck with a bow is an accomplishment. And that's what gets lost on a lot of people sometimes today. And just the fact that you celebrate that and you keep the goals realistic, I can't emphasize that enough. I just hope a lot more people start to see that and just appreciate what they have in their area and be proud of it.
Yeah, and that was kind of something that I, growing up in Michigan and having that tradition, is something to be said, because if you've never been, and I'm sure it is like out in PA and everything, and there's traditions everywhere, but I only know what I grew up in, and I got to be realistic with myself, and I'm not going to sit there and hold out for a 140, 150 when I've never seen one in Michigan, really. I've never had one on camera. My unicorns are 125 to 130 inch 3.5-year-olds. And I'm telling you what, the day that I lose the adrenaline rush over that is the day that I probably will stop hunting Michigan. But I don't ever foresee that happening, because there's just something about seeing a 3.5-year-old to 4.5-year-old deer, to get them to be able to, cruise in daylight hours, regardless of the score. Like, I think a lot of people get wrapped up in the score. I do as well. It's easy to do that. That's the way our world is now. But the story and the journey is what's so cool to me. And shooting Jim Abbott last year, even though I wasn't able to recover him and do it in an ethical way and kill him, even though I didn't, I was so upset. But I remember going home and telling my wife, I'm like, after the last couple days of looking for him and not finding him and finding out he's still alive, I, kind of she had to ground me a little bit and say, you know what? You've spent so much time putting in an off season to just get one opportunity at a deer that you've been chasing for 3 years now. And it's like, you had that opportunity. Yeah, it didn't come out to, you didn't, the outcome wasn't the greatest, but, you hung that stand, you did all the pre-work, everything, the hinge cutting, habitat, all that stuff, and you got him within range on 3 acres. She's like, you accomplished your goal. And it kind of like resonated with me a little bit. And it's like, yeah, like, why am I being so ungrateful and being, pissing and moaning when it's like, I'm hunting, this is what I do. Even though I didn't, complete my goal the way I wanted to, I did complete my goal. I was successful, and that's what's fun to me, and like I said, those bucks are unicorns for me around here, and you don't see them every day. At least I don't. And that's still what's really cool to me. And that's what I like. So,
well, what I thought was really cool about this whole conversation and listening to your stuff is that you've done all this through hunting and habitat work, focus and just sweat, stuff that all of our listeners and all of your listeners can go out and do themselves. Everybody can do this stuff. Getting this unicorn 3.5-year-old 125-inch deer, which is the same goal that I have for my property, by the way, is something we can all do by just creating better habitat, hunting smarter, understanding deer biology better, just doing the stuff that we talk about and learning. So I just like to literally, this podcast is like a story of how just anybody can go out and do it, even on a 1-acre piece of woods. That's just so cool.
Yeah, for sure, man. And if anybody out there is listening to this and has any further questions for either, Jared or, you guys or Brian and me, I mean, feel free. I'm an open book. I have no secrets. Whatever you want, I mean, get a hold of me, get a hold of you guys. I'm sure the same thing. Like, I love talking about this stuff, and any way I can help someone else is huge. And lastly, I know I'm kind of dragging on here. There's one thing that I do want to, there's one thing that I've been doing the last couple of years that's really helped me out, and it's just the way my brain works, is I take a journal.
Oh, I gotta start doing this.
I take a journal of everything I do. I started in 2012, and I literally would write down, I'd keep it in my truck in the center console. When I get back to the truck in a night hunt or a morning hunt, I would write down what I see. I saw 2 fawns, 2 button bucks or whatever. I saw 3 1/2-year-old deer, and then I'd tally up, like, at the end of the year, what I saw, the age class of bucks that I saw and how many deer I saw. And it was really cool to see that at the end of the year. But I also kind of took it a step further 2 years ago. I took a journal for every time I stepped on the property. Whatever I did, I wrote a date. I wrote what happened. I went and hinge cutted, the 1 acre. I frost seeded, whatever I did. I had 2 does walk up on me while I was doing it. And it's just because I'm kind of anal about it, that kind of stuff. But it was cool to see the progression of that. And for one thing, I wanted something that my kids, later, hopefully, if they have the same passion as I did, they could, listen to my podcast, or my grandkids, later in life, they could be like, this is how Grandpa was, or, and they could read this journal and be like, this is Grandpa's life in the fall, or something. That was kind of my first inclination, but then it kind of started coming into something more about, like, the barometric pressure was 30.25, and it was out of the southwest, and the wind was overcast, and I put all that in my head, and then I go back and look and see what worked. And I don't know if it helps, but it helps me just kind of stay focused, I guess you could say, and it's kind of fun to do. And at the end of this year, I'd have to go back and look, but the 1 acre, I don't count like yearling deer. I only count adult deer, and I saw 17 bucks and 17 does. Now, yeah, there were probably some different, the same deer a couple times in there, but throughout the year, because the 1 acre, I don't see a lot of deer. The herd's not like the biggest herd out there, but at the end of the year, I saw like my buck to doe ratio, I figured was around, 1 to 1, which is pretty good. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's just from my notes and what I took. So, but yeah, I would say that's like a cool way to be able to, just jot things down. Because I'll tell you, even in my day-to-day life, if I don't write it down, I forget it. So
my wife would say the same thing.
Wait till you hit your 40s.
I don't want to think about that. Yeah.
Well, if anybody wants to find more about Aaron Blasey, where can they go?
Well, the first thing, I guess, would be obviously Instagram. I have my own personal Instagram. I don't do a lot of it on it. You're probably going to see a lot of my kid and my wife and a little bit of hunting. But then go to the Fall Podcast Instagram, and that's where I post a lot of my stuff of what I'm doing hunting-wise, and I kind of keep family stuff off of that. That's just for, hunting and hunting-related things. Go to there. iTunes, go search the Fall Podcast. You can, download, subscribe there. I've got all my podcast episodes on my YouTube channel, the Fall Podcast. I'm starting to put up more videos, more like vlog style videos up there. So a lot of my listeners have been wanting to see more videos of, bow tuning and what I'm doing with hinge cutting. And I just whip my cell phone out and just take a video and put it up. It's raw, it's real time. So, there's another good spot. And then anything that I do day to day with Chris and Casey, Sportsman's Channel, Rival Wild is our whitetail show. It's on right now Wednesday nights at 7:30. And then Dropped is another show. It's not airing right now. And then the Kiefer Brothers YouTube channel, basically everything on there, I either had a hand in editing, filming, or I'm the talent in it. So I'm getting worked into more like in front of the camera as well. So that's just another way to find it as well. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome, man. Well, I want to thank you one more time for coming on the Habitat Podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you. I think you are so much like Brian and I. It's ridiculous. So it was just a matter of time before we got together.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for having me on. And I need to return the favor here. So maybe in the next couple weeks I can have both you guys on here and we can maybe get down to the nitty-gritty of some, any other sort of habitat stuff. And a lot of my listeners want to hear more of that. And like I said, I need to work with my green thumb, and you guys might be the guys I need to have on to teach me some more food plot stuff. So
we'll be there, man.
Sounds good.
Awesome, boys. Well, thank you very much for letting me come on here and jab your jaw for an hour and a half. And I always enjoy talking deer and deer hunting, and I appreciate it, man.
No problem, Aaron. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
on, and maybe we'll see you up at Boyne here pretty soon.
Yeah, sounds good, man. And there it is. A lot of cool information on this podcast. It was really fun to sit down with Jared and Brian. They got a really cool podcast over there. So, if you guys will go over to the Habitat Podcast on any social media channel, or, download them on iTunes, or, basically anywhere where you can download a podcast. But go give those guys a 5-star rating and a review. That'd be great and, much appreciated. They got some cool things going on. And, Brian, he's in PA. He's got some farms in Ohio. But Jared, he's here in southern Michigan, so pretty cool dynamic and really good guys, and they're putting out some really cool content. So as for me, today's Monday, obviously, and Friday comes the Total Archery Challenge up in Boyne Mountain, so I'm heading up there Friday morning. I'm going to shoot with a buddy first thing in the morning, and then Lee and Adam and Keegan and Zach, the guys that I work with and everything, are coming up a little later in the afternoon. I'm going to shoot with them as well. So long day of shooting. Can't wait to cover, the shoot on the next podcast. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great week, and don't forget, go to iTunes and please leave a review, leave a rating. Just, hit the 5 stars. I appreciate that, and hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for listening.